Coogs House, are you ready for some basketball?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougars. If you enjoy the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you have a favorite flavor of cookie, what's your favorite cookie flavor? Part of a pre-start of the season ritual, I guess it's supposed to be that they get Samson made cookies. That's Mrs. Samson made cookies. I wouldn't assume Kelvin can make those, but tell us in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's a bonus episode today talking about basketball, but still brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. More on that fun later. But this is a bonus episode previewing Houston's basketball game to open the season on Monday night against Jackson State. And we're still figuring out a lot about Jackson State, still figuring out a lot about this Houston Cougar Houston Cougar basketball program. Oh my God, I'm still getting out of football mode. And I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk just about the Cougs, the high hopes, and then in the second segment to talk some about Jackson State. I think this is just a 2-segment kind of bonusy deal, so we'll see where things go from there. We'll be live post-game, breaking it down. Stay tuned to me on X and Twitter at Panger512, both a live tweet throughout the game as well as those updates on when that show is going to happen. If you hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're live. We also get an update there. All right, Houston enters the season ranked number 4 in the country in the AP poll. Preseason ranked number 2 in the Big 12 in basketball. And frankly, we've talked on this show before, but I want to reiterate, I would almost argue that's disrespectfully low ranking. Houston spent a lot of last season ranked number 1, 2, or 3 in the country. Houston lost just one starter, brought in 2 top 80 recruits in the country. They've replaced that one starter with a transfer from a 2-year starter from a Power 4 program that been pretty good while he was there. And I think there's, frankly, a lack of understanding about what Houston does in this. Houston is replacing an incredible basketball player in Jamal Shead. I can't say that enough. I can't stress enough that you don't just replace Jamal Shead with one person. But they've replaced a lot more people a lot more often. And I think Houston's going to be up to the task. That does not mean that they don't have high hopes this season. I think that is all external at this point. Houston, has their eyes on the prize. This is a continual, trudge forward towards a eventual national championship. Final Four is in San Antonio this year, so why the heck not? Now, obviously, Final Four in 2021, a couple Sweet 16 since. Each of those has had an injury sprinkled through it. I guess the Elite 8 year also had injuries earlier in it, although they weren't in the tournament, if I recall correctly. But that team did wear itself out by the end because of those injuries from earlier. But Sasser in the groin, Jamal Shead's knees that year just kind of wore out. And then by the time you got to last year, Jamal Shead's ankle. So hope would be healthy and fit for this year. I think the big reason that Houston is going to get that done and win that national title is their depth. Houston, when healthy, can legitimately play like 11 different players on the court at any given moment without any real drop-off in talent, intensity, defensive focus, anything. Now, they all have different skill sets, and so finding the right guys on the floor for a given game in a challenging game may be the problem. But and this is no slight against Jackson State or any other of these non-conference opponents, with the goal being to win every game, I guess, when you walk into it, but really and truthfully to win the Big 12 and then to win it all after that. You're going to see across a lot of these non-conference games a lot of different looking lineups. You'll see different guys taking shots at point guard. I see some J1 at the 5, some J1 at the 4, just because he plays a bunch of different big guy positions. You'll see some small ball lineups with Terrence at the 4 or Ramon at the 4. You'll see some big body lineups with, Terrence at the 2, and maybe Mercy brings it up. Chase is a bigger forward. Maybe J1 at the 3, even like JoJo Tugler in there somewhere. Like lots of these bigger lineups as well. A bunch of different things kind of mixing and matching till they kind of see what they get out of different lineups because they have so many different options. The biggest piece of this, though, is that replacement at point guard. That's what everyone's eyes are going to be on. That's, I think, my keenest focus in these first couple weeks is how does Milos come in and run the show? Because while a point guard and a quarterback are not necessarily the same thing, or a point guard and a pitcher are not necessarily the same thing, the ball is in their hands so much more as a point guard than anyone else that I think it does bear some sort of a comparison. And so what does Milos do as the guy running the floor, running the show? Sampson says 3 guys cannot have bad days. One of them is the head coach. One of them is your best player. One of them is your point guard. Now, last year, the 2 of those were the same. But this year, as look at it, what does Milos bring? I think in the exhibition game against A&M, what we saw from Milos was that he is a excellent defender. He's got the tools to be a Houston defender. He's still growing into the role. The intensity is different. And frankly, we've got to remember he's also playing with a broken nose. And so maybe that'll be a little different when that mask comes off. He's all good to go, right? But he has the length, the size, the athleticism, and frankly, the occasional intangible, like that's where the ball is going, kind of intuition that make me think he'll fit in just fine. Is just when. When will it click? When will he fit in? I think he's going to be all right in that instance. On offense, I was surprised that he took the second most shots in the A&M game. That might have been a function of just how many guys rotated through. So Milo shot 8 shots that game. And the ball was spread around pretty evenly. Outside of LJ, it was like 5, 5, 6, 6, that kind of stuff, right? I wonder if the truth is that Milos is just like an 8 to 9 shots per game kind of guy. And as you get to shorter rotations, you'll see more shots for Emmanuel, more shots for J1, more shots for other guys, right? And so, like, his shots per game may stay the same even as his minutes increase later in the season. We'll see. I'm not worried about him shooting the ball much. It's not the guy I thought we were getting. He's a very, very skilled passer. A couple months at A&M game, in an exhibition game, you saw him find kick-out threes, driving dishes, see different angles. And I think that's in part because as a 6'4" point guard, he sees over things very well, right? For all of the things Jamal did well, he had great vision and great awareness and great feel, but he couldn't see over the top. He's 6'6", right? Like that's just a difference in 3 inches. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see play out because for all the success Houston's had for several years now, really the majority of this Kelvin Sampson era, they haven't had a point guard with this type of body. Ladiki's long, and so he had some natural things there, but like Rob Gray was on the shorter side, Jamal Shead the shorter side, right? Like these guys, and I guess Rob technically wasn't the point, he was more of a 2, but if you get what I'm saying, they typically do this with smaller guys, a 6'4" point guard, really, and like every bit of 6'4" really brings another layer to and level to what he can do. I want to see what the big men's rotation looks like. It's still unclear as of, it doesn't sound like Francis is going to play, how long he'll be out for. And then obviously Jacob McFarland is out for the year, I'd imagine, with that surgery. I guess I stand to be corrected, but I imagine that turned into a medical redshirt year, which is just gutting because it sounds like he was on his way to having a pretty strong redshirt freshman campaign. That means the front court rotation is going to have Roberts, it's going to have Tugler, it's going to have Lott, and I imagine you see some power forward minutes out of Terrence Arsenault, out of Ramon Walker, and maybe even Malik, although Malik uses his leaping to get through that. I want to talk about Jackson State in a second and talk about like why you probably won't get a lot of itty-bitty lineups. But I really do think that like the strength of this team is they can play a lineup with anyone. Whatever you want to line up with, they can find a series of guys that can play Houston Cougar basketball and match up with you in that way. I don't think it's crazy to have expectations of San Antonio in the Final Four for this team. Obviously, health will be a factor. Obviously, getting through the Big 12 gauntlet will be a factor. Obviously, matchups in the first, second, Sweet 16, Elite Eight, those will all be a factor as well, right? But on the whole, I think as we sit here on November 4th, getting ready for a game, that Houston ought to win running away, right? Like, I think that it's not crazy to have that expectation. And, we can talk about Phi Slam Jamma and Akeem Olajuwon and that kind of stuff all we want. But truthfully, that's just a remarkable place to be at. Again, it feels like a win, not an if, this Houston Cougar basketball program wins a national title just with the trajectory they've been on. And it feels weirdly like even after losing Marcus, Jarris, and Tremont, even after losing Jamal, it weirdly feels like there's something magical in the air right now. It's just a good time to be a Coug. And year two in the Big 12, you know what you're getting into. A lot of the locations, although some of the new schools like Arizona and stuff, while you've played the program a couple years ago in the tournaments, you're maybe not familiar with the road trip. You've got a lot of familiarity though, across the board. Really have to feel good about what you're doing here. Now, I want to talk some about Jackson State specifically as the opening night opponent in a second. But first, I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I'm not even going to look up the spread for this basketball game. I'm telling you, if you want to go put some money on it, get in on the action, you got to do it over at FanDuel because right now, new customers can get just putting down $5, winning that bet, get you $150 back in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets, NFL games, all in one place. You can check out live stats, latest play-by-plays, etc., all happening on FanDuel.com. So join in today. $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Park Ranger, Locked on Cougs here, talking about Houston's basketball season opening up tonight with Jackson State. I'll be live post-game. Follow me on X at Painsworth512 to get more information about that as we go. Or hit subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell so you know we're live. We'll be live on the YouTube show. If you're an audio listener, we'll be available on all audio platforms Tuesday morning. You just can't chime in with comments, I guess, during it. But we'll be breaking it down as well. Tuesday afternoon will be another edition of our book club with Mirren. Had to kick that a day just to make sure we had time to talk about this basketball game. So Houston hosts Jackson State, still coached by Mo Williams. Yes, the Mo Williams that played the Cleveland Cavaliers back when LeBron James took them to their first title appearance, championship game appearance back in 2007 or whatever was that guy. He's frankly kind of becoming a pretty popular coach. Now, Jackson State didn't quite break 500 last year at 15-17, but people are noticing what he's doing there. And he's kind of, starting to turn the corner a little bit with that program. It's hard to look at this team, though, and figure out their roster because of so much movement. The top score from last year is now at Florida Atlantic, FAU. And this is not a show where we're previewing neither one of these teams is FAU. FAU is going to be a team to keep an eye on, continues to be a team to keep an eye on, so look out for them with some of the additions they made in the transfer portal. But Jackson State lost their best scorer to there. They lost their second scorer to graduation, the third leading scorer from last year's team to Louisiana Monroe, fourth leading scorer to graduation, fifth leading scorer to Louisiana Lafayette. They simply lost a lot of talent off of last year's team and had to replace a lot of it, and did so with a combination of freshmen and transfer portal kids. The biggest transfer portal kid name to keep an eye on this one is Deshaun Ruffin. I imagine he's a starting point guard. He's a 5'10-ish kind of guy, but he was the number 46 recruit in the country in 2021. Went to Ole Miss. And just frankly didn't get the burn there, I don't think. Chris Beard comes in, changes the culture up there, changes what they're doing a little bit. Frankly, brings in a bunch of his own guys. Ruffin needs to get out, and he leaves, ends up at Jackson State. He is not an elite scorer necessarily, but I don't think I'd leave him open. I wouldn't worry about him a whole lot from behind the arc, but he can put on the floor and he can go fast. He's really, really quick and shifty. So again, I imagine Milos gets him, and I think Milos's length will really bother him in the starting lineup. But I could also see just because he's so short, LJ Cryer being a little bit undersized as a two guard, maybe Cryer gets him. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways Houston could go there, but without having seen Ruffin fit into Mo Williams' system yet, I just need to let you guys know he's the guy with the highest pedigree coming in. A couple other transfers to keep an eye on. Big fella, 6'10", 6'11". His name is Shannon Gant. Played at Mercer and FAMU. Over 10 points per game last year. He's a big that, he's not necessarily the toughest rebounding big. I think Houston will be fine with him there, but he is long. He does have some good touch. He's going to score some points. Got to keep an eye on him. Other big guy, 6'9", 6'10"-ish, depending on what listing you're looking at, is Romel Mansell. Romel Mansell. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I hadn't heard it said before. I will say, in watching his YouTube stuff, he is another guy that's kind of a bruising big guy at 6'7", 6'8", whatever he's at. And he played at Long Beach State before transferring to Jackson State. Again, that's a couple guys from D1 programs that good D1 programs transferring back to Jackson State. I also want to bring up guard Juan Reyna. I imagine he gets the Emmanuel Sharp matchup in this game. He's a 6'2" guard, went to Duncanville High School in DFW, which is like a perennial top 10 in the country program. And he's a really strong guard, really solid player. Doesn't do anything terribly exceptionally, doesn't do anything bad either. He's bounced around a little bit in college, but all about this level of basketball. Again, he's 6'2". If he were 6'5", he'd have been somewhere big time, right? He's that kind of a guard. I think that Houston can handle him. I don't mean to hype him up or anything, but he's does a lot of things well that Houston just kind of have to make sure they mark him, right? I wouldn't expect Jackson State to be a big time 3-point shooting team. They got all these bigs. Frankly, they have Jamie Mitchell shoots 54% from three, but on super low attempts. So I guess don't leave him open, but he also doesn't shoot them that often. Outside of that, the only person with an even decent 3-point percentage that has played Division I basketball before is Juan Reyna at 36%, which is good, but it's not like I don't know how we're going to cover him good, right? And I think this team's going to be a lot more about drive, dish, drive, drop, the occasional post up, but a lot of other ways to get their posts moving because they have size and length, pick and roll, hit the roller kind of stuff. And, every one of these teams that Houston is supposed to beat is going to have a different style. And I think the biggest thing that Sampson does in these games is he finds teams to play that have different styles. Jackson State's going to be big. Well, obviously Houston will play teams that are big throughout the year. And this functionally feels like an opponent that you can practice what you want to do against those guys on. We'll see what they think of Deshaun Ruffin. I think he's good. I don't think that I'm worried about him, but we'll see, right? We'll see. Now, again, we'll be here live post game. I'm expecting a large Houston Cougar win with lots of things to talk about. But I really want to see what Milos looks like. We'll be breaking that down live after the game on YouTube. Locked on Cougs. Locked on Cougs, your one daily podcast on all things Houston Cougars each and every day. Locked on Cougs, primarily Locked on Podcast. Everything is your team every day. Go Cougs.